Let's start here. Samia Suluhu Hassan was on Friday sworn in as Tanzania's first female president after the death of John Magufuli. Hassan will serve out the remainder of Magufuli's second 5-year term, which expires in the year 2025. She was elected vice president alongside Magufuli back in 2015 and again last year. Magufuli died earlier this week after being absent from the public life since February. He had first been briefly admitted to the Jakaya Kikwete Cardiac Institute in March the 6th and was subsequently discharged before taking ill again. Harvey, the Director of Research and Programs at Good Governance Africa, joins me now via our video line to discuss the developments in Tanzania. Ross, a pleasure to have you on the program this afternoon. I want to begin by first reflecting on the statements made while the new president was being sworn in. President Suluhu Hassan has said that the country should unite and avoid pointing fingers after the death of John Magufuli. Now, her remarks appear aimed at dispelling a mood of uncertainty. What's been your assessment?
Yeah, indeed. It raises this broader question of exactly where she sits in the party and what's likely to now unfold within CCM post Magufuli's death. But this idea of uniting the nation, it's probably a bit too late, given frankly the tragedy of the last elections in Tanzania, and this idea of not pointing fingers. Well, frankly, fingers have to be pointed. You know, if we're serious about governance, as we are at Good Governance Afrika, then we must unfortunately call out that when a leader of Magufuli's stature denies that COVID has ravaged his country and people die as a result, not only within Tanzania but possibly beyond its borders, then in fact fingers must be pointed as they were at the time. And of course, we're not in the business of speaking ill of the dead. However, we are in the business of saying, look, Magufuli hardly covered himself in glory in this particular respect. And so, of course, Suluhu Hassan is in a position where she is going to have to say, look, we need to pull together. We need to build on his legacy and so on. She is a continuation of the Magufuli faction, if you like, which has grown since 2015. Remember that when Magufuli came into power, he didn't exactly have a strong faction behind him, but it looked as if the pre-Kikwete faction had actually endorsed Magufuli's leadership, given his proficiency around running infrastructure projects and his reputation for being a no-nonsense hard worker, which was to his credit.
I want us to zoom in a bit more into this last aspect that you make. So some analysts are arguing that she will also be faced with the task of healing a country which has been polarized during the Magufuli years and building her own political base to govern effectively. What's your view in this regard?
Yeah, it's interesting enough. I've been listening to a number of analysts. My own particular take in this respect, and I may, of course, have history prove me wrong, but I would see Suluhu Hassan essentially as a continuation of the hard line that Magufuli has entrenched. And I think it's important to remember also that, while there has been internal democracy within CCM as a party, I think one can expect to see that in terms of how it governs, it's not going to tolerate opposition. And I think that is unfortunately a tragedy for democracy. Ultimately, democracy causes growth, and we have good evidence to that effect now, and that's been a kind of controversial subject for a number of years. But I think we have to accept that CCM will try and solidify its own position, especially given that it doesn't like opposition, and certainly it would have been bruised with the reputational damage it suffered around the last election, heavily persecuting the opposition, certainly since Magufuli came into power.
But what will be the real test here? I mean, her leadership style is seen as a potential contrast from Magufuli, who was a brash populist who earned the nickname the bulldozer for muscling through policies and who drew criticism for his intolerance of dissent, as you rightfully set out. Now, Suluhu served as vice president since 2015. Do you expect a different posture from her predecessor?
No. I don't, and I say that because, well, let's split this into two parts. It is right to say that Magufuli developed a reputation as a bulldozer, and in fact, it was interesting when I first travelled to the country in 2016. There was unequivocal support from anyone and everyone who you spoke to about Magufuli. The fact that he was putting an end to corruption, the fact that he was efficient at getting the job done, so that there was that kind of sense about him, that he was a mover and shaker and that he took no nonsense, and people were very pleased about this. However, there was concern that this authoritarian streak would actually end up going badly, and in fact that proved to be the case. I was last there around the Rugby World Cup on the day that South Africa won, actually flying back from the Suluhu into Dar es Salaam. And the taxi driver who picked me up from the airport said he felt so fearful that if he even mentioned anything negative about Magufuli, that it would be picked up by the intelligence services. So it gives you a kind of sense of the way in which the mood in Tanzania had shifted from one of jubilation to one of intense fear, certainly by 2019, 2020. So remember that Suluhu Hassan steps into that now, and of course, shortly before his death, Magufuli appointed Dr. Bushra Ali as his chief secretary. And I think the best analysis that I've seen thus far and talk on the streets in Tanzania is in fact that Hassan will be essentially controlled by Ali. And of course, this kind of analytical speculation can go wrong. There are many who have, for instance, said that Lourenço in Angola was simply going to be a continuation of the old regime. But in fact, the way in which he came to power strongly suggested that there was a sharp break with his predecessor, Dos Santos. And so, maybe would be proved wrong, but I think that it's fair to say that Hassan hasn't had a particularly strong position in the party. She was brought in into a high ministerial post by Kikwete, but it looks as if Ali is actually pulling the strings, and so I don't expect that we're going to see a new democratic dawn, as it were. The hope, of course, is that internally within the CCM there may be some more tolerance, within the party for dissenting views, which of course would be good. The road to democracy actually starts with the ruling coalition becoming more tolerant of democracy within. So that would be the hope.
So Ross, I want us to shift gears a bit here. Among the first tasks that will be facing Hassan will be the decision on whether to roll out vaccines. What do you expect in this regard? I mean, under her predecessor, the government had said that it would not obtain any vaccines until the country's own experts had reviewed them. Do we expect her to take a different stance and to act more swiftly to have the vaccines delivered to Tanzania?
That's almost an impossible question to answer, in that a lot will depend on how Ali himself sees this as a political opportunity. So, in fact, if it is the case that he would try to assert more power within the party, and this is his opportunity to break with his predecessor, and of course it's a low-hanging fruit. So if I were him, if you like, or if I were his political advisor, I'd say, right, this is your moment to say, look, we're going to make every effort to acquire vaccines. And of course, I think we may have an optimism bias in that respect, because we really want Tanzania to start testing and treating and vaccinating its people who have suffered immeasurably under a leader who frankly chose to deny that COVID was ravaging the country the way that it was. So I don't know. Ali might. And Hassan might be in agreement in that respect. It remains to be seen. I'd hate to put my neck on the block on this one.
Well, Ross, thank you very much for your insights. That's Ross Harvey. He's the Director for Research and Programs at Good Governance Africa.